The shadow under the motel sign. The desert stop. The neon sign of the Desert Moon Motel buzzed in the warm night air, half its letters flickering weakly against the endless stretch of Route 66. Evan Parker's Chevy Malibu coasted into the empty parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. He'd been driving for 12 hours straight. Heat, silence, and fatigue had turned the desert into a mirage of shadows. He just needed a bed, a shower, and coffee in the morning. The front office light flickered as he stepped in. The air smelled of old cigarettes and dust. Behind the desk sat an old man in a flannel shirt, eyes fixed on a black and white TV playing static. "Need a room for the night," Evan said. Without looking up, the man slid a tarnished key across the counter. "Room 9, he muttered. "Don't leave after midnight." Evan frowned, half chuckling. "Why, coyotes?" The man finally looked up, his pale eyes serious. "They don't howl here anymore." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying sand across the glowing parking lot. As Evan walked to his room, he noticed a large dark patch under the motel sign, shaped vaguely like a person. But when the light flickered again, the shadow moved, even though nothing stood there to cast it. He brushed it off, unlocked room 9, and shut the door behind him. The hum of the motel's neon was the only sound, until a faint tap-tap echoed from the window. The room with no sound inside room 9 felt wrong. The air was stale, humid, and smelled faintly of metal, like rain that never fell. A single yellow bulb lit the cramped space. One bed, one nightstand, and an old rotary phone that looked like it hadn't worked in decades. Evan tried turning on the TV, but all he got was static. The remote crackled and a faint whisper bled through the screen, something low, indistinguishable. He killed the power and sat on the bed. The bedsheets were damp. He peeled them back and froze. Handprints smeared faintly in the fabric. Maybe stains, he told himself. Maybe rust. But then came the tapping again. He turned toward the window, nothing but the glowing motel sign outside. The shadow was still there, pulsing faintly against the asphalt. It wasn't shaped like a person anymore. It looked stretched, thin, crawling closer to his door. Evan shut the curtains tight and lay down. He could still hear it. The sound of something dragging along the window frame, slow and deliberate. He reached for the old rotary phone to call the front desk. To his shock, and there was a dial tone, but when he pressed 0, a woman's voice whispered on the other end, breathy and close, "You shouldn't have looked at it." The line went dead. The gas station story. The next morning, Evan woke to the sound of knocking. He opened the door expecting sunlight, but the sky was dark gray, heavy with dust. The old motel clerk stood there holding a cup of burnt coffee. "You leaving today?" he asked. "Yeah, everything okay here?" Evan asked, rubbing his eyes. The clerk sighed. "Should have never stayed in room 9. That one's got a history." "What kind of history?" The old man looked down at the cracked pavement. "A girl went missing here 10 years ago. They found her car, her bag, but not her body. Folks said she was seen under that motel sign, just standing. Like she was waiting for someone to notice her." Evan forced a laugh. "That's a hell of a welcome brochure." But when he looked toward the parking lot, the shadow was still there, even in daylight. Faint but visible, like a burn mark on the ground. He blinked, unnerved. That night, as he drove to the nearby gas station, the attendant, who was a teenage boy with greasy hair, recognized the motel key on Evan's keychain. "You're staying at the Desert Moon?" the kid asked, pale. "Man, don't stay there. People see things. Things that follow 'em home." Evan pocketed his keys quickly and looked into the reflection on the glass. Behind him, in the rain-streaked window, he saw a silhouette standing by his car. Head tilted. When he turned, the lot was empty. The return to room 9. Evan should have left that night, but fatigue and stubborn logic made him return. The clerk was gone when he got back. The office lights were off. The parking lot glowed under the flickering neon, and the shadow under the sign was bigger now. It moved when the wind didn't. Inside room 9, everything was exactly as he'd left it, except the sheets were gone, replaced with plastic covers that crackled when touched. On the wall above the bed hung a new photograph, black and white, slightly tilted. It showed a young woman standing in the very same room, smiling faintly. He leaned closer. The edges of the photograph were wet. When he turned around, the air in the room changed, colder, heavier. The light bulb flickered 3 times, then went out completely. In the dark, he heard soft barefoot steps moving across the carpet toward him. He reached for his phone flashlight. It flicked on, and for 1 second, he saw her, the girl from the photo, soaked and pale, her mouth open in a silent scream. Then she was gone. But on the mirror near the bathroom, fog had formed words, "Don't leave me here." The storm over Route 66. That night, a desert storm rolled in. Thunder cracked, and lightning illuminated the empty motel strip. Evan sat on the bed, watching rain streak the glass. Every flash of lightning made the shadow outside grow darker, more defined. At 1:11 a.m., the power died. A sharp knock came at the door. 3 times. He stayed still. Then the doorknob turned slowly, creaking open. Rain poured through the gap, splattering the carpet. But no one stood outside. Only the shape of a woman visible in the reflection of a puddle. "Please," a faint voice whispered, "take me home." Evan stumbled backward, heart hammering. His flashlight flickered, illuminating the corner where water pooled thick and black. Almost alive, a pale hand reached out from it. Gripping the edge of the bed, he bolted for the door, the motel hallway echoing with his footsteps. But when he reached the exit, it was still raining inside, and outside the neon sign hummed brighter than ever, casting his own shadow onto the ground, except it wasn't moving with him anymore. The chase through the desert. Evan ran to his car, slamming the door, engine roaring to life. The wipers smeared mud and rain across the windshield. In the rearview mirror, the shadow under the sign split, forming into 2 shapes. He sped down the highway, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. But even as he drove, he could see something in the mirrors, a figure running alongside the road, keeping pace with his car. Mile after mile, it stayed there. When he blinked, it was suddenly ahead of him, standing in the middle of the road, arms outstretched. He swerved, crashed through a fence, and skidded into the sand. Smoke filled the car. He coughed, reaching for his phone. Screen cracked, no signal. Outside, the storm cleared. Silence returned. Then came a knock, and not on the car window, but from underneath the vehicle. The ditch. Evan crawled out, shaking, into the quiet desert air. His car lights flickered weakly, revealing a dry irrigation ditch nearby. In it, half buried by sand, was an old photograph glinting in the dust. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was the same girl from room 9, standing under the motel sign. On the back, faint handwriting read, "June 12, 2007, last seen here." As thunder rumbled in the distance again, Evan realized the shadow wasn't gone. It was stretching out from the ditch, long fluid, moving toward him. He stumbled backward, tripping into the sand. The air thickened, a whisper echoing inside his head. "You took her room." Then, from the direction of Route 66, the motel sign flickered to life again, even though he was miles away. The same shadow crawled across the desert toward him, faster now. The news report. 2 days later, state police found Evan's car abandoned near an old service road. The vehicle was empty, lights still on, doors open. Inside the trunk, they found a stack of developed photographs, all showing the Desert Moon Motel, each picture slightly older than the last. In every one, the same woman appeared closer to the camera. The motel itself had burned down 3 years earlier. When officers visited the site, they found nothing but sand and broken neon glass, except for one thing, a fresh set of tire tracks leading straight to where room 9 used to be. And at night, travelers still report seeing a flickering sign out there on Route 66, glowing faintly in the dark. Beneath it, a single shadow sways back and forth, waiting for someone to stop and ask for a room. The screams beneath Hollow Creek Bridge, the call at 2:17 a.m. Rain hammered the roof of the ambulance as it crawled up the twisting mountain road. The headlights cut through sheets of fog, revealing signs half buried in mud. Hollow Creek Bridge closed ahead. Rachel Dyer checked her radio again. Static. Dispatch had reported a car crash on the old bridge, but no follow-up. She and her partner, Luis, were the only unit nearby. "Feels like we're chasing ghosts," Luis muttered, tightening his seatbelt. The bridge came into view, a narrow steel structure, decades old, sagging over a roaring creek swollen with rainwater. Their headlights glimmered off the rusted metal. Rachel stepped out, flashlight in hand. The rain was freezing. "See anything?" she shouted. Louise pointed toward the guardrail. A crumpled sedan, hazard lights flickering weakly. Steam hissed from the hood. She ran to the driver's side. The door hung open. No one inside. No footprints. Only the sound of water below and the steady click of the blinker echoing across the bridge. Then, faintly under the thunder, came a scream. It wasn't far, maybe under the bridge. Rachel leaned over the edge with her flashlight, scanning the dark creek below. The beam caught on something white. A torn jacket sleeve snagged on the rocks. Then came another scream, that louder, desperate, cutting through the storm. Louise yelled, "We gotta call this in!" But the radio only hissed. From somewhere under the bridge, a wet, dragging sound began, followed by 3 faint knocks on the steel beams below. Voices under the bridge. Rain pooled on the cracked asphalt as Rachel crouched by the guardrail, shouting into the void below. "Hello? Can you hear me?" "Hold on." No answer, only the sound of rushing water and the wind howling through the bridge's metal ribs. Louise climbed down the embankment with a rope light, his boots slipping in the mud. "Probably someone got swept down," he yelled. Rachel scanned the creek. The flashlight beam danced across the black water, then froze. A face stared back, pale, half-submerged, eyes open but unmoving. She gasped and scrambled down after Louise. When they reached the creek bed, the face vanished beneath the surface. Louise cursed under his breath. It was probably debris, but Rachel knew what she saw. The stillness, the hollow eyes, the way it looked straight at her. They searched the area for over an hour. Nothing. No footprints, no body, no evidence of anyone at all. Finally, Louise sighed. "Let's go back to the car. This is getting weird." They trudged up the hill. Halfway across the bridge, Rachel heard it again, a faint whisper carried by the wind. "Help me!" It sounded like a woman's voice, soft but urgent, coming from directly under her feet. She froze. "Louise, did you hear that?" He turned, confused. "Hear what?" Before she could respond, her flashlight flickered, and for a split second, through the gaps in the bridge grating, she saw a hand reaching upward, pale fingers scraping the steel beams. When she blinked, it was gone. Only the rain and thunder remained. The missing report. They returned to the ambulance, soaked and shaken. Rachel tried the radio again, still static. Louise grabbed his phone. No service. The storm had killed the signal. He pulled out his thermos, muttering, "We'll call it in when we get back to town." "No one's here." But Rachel couldn't shake the voice. Back at the county station 2 hours later, she filed an incomplete incident report. When the sheriff reviewed it, he frowned. There hasn't been a crash out there in years. That bridge has been closed since '09 after a girl went missing. Rachel felt her chest tighten. "What girl?" The sheriff pulled out an old binder and slid over a faded photo. A young woman in her 20s, dark hair, smiling by a white sedan, Abigail Holt, went missing driving home from a bar in 2009. Last seen crossing Hollow Creek Bridge. The case had gone cold. "She was never found," the sheriff said. "Locals say if you stop there after midnight, you'll hear her calling for help." Rachel's hands trembled slightly. "We heard her." "I swear we did." The sheriff looked at her steadily. "Then I'd stay away from that bridge." That night, when Rachel went home and turned on her apartment TV, the screen filled with static for just a moment, then flickered to an image that froze her blood. A woman's wet face, staring at the camera, whispering, "You found my car." Then the screen went black. Back to Hollow Creek, Rachel couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that face beneath the bridge, pale, pleading, unfinished. By the next evening, she made up her mind. She grabbed her flashlight, a flare gun, and drove back toward Hollow Creek. The night was still. No rain this time, just fog clinging low to the asphalt. The bridge stood silent, moonlight glinting off its wet steel beams. The crashed sedan from the night before was gone. She parked the ambulance nearby and stepped out. Her boots echoed across the bridge. "Abigail," she called softly. "I'm here to help." The wind stirred, carrying whispers that weren't quite words. She leaned over the railing. The creek below shimmered with moonlight. For a moment it was peaceful. Then, the metal under her feet groaned, as if something heavy was moving beneath. Rachel knelt, shined her light between the gaps, and saw a shape crawling along the underside of the bridge. Pale arms dragging, wet hair hanging down. She staggered back. the flashlight slipping from her hands. The beam rolled across the ground, illuminating a trail of muddy, bare footprints leading straight toward her van. Her breathing quickened. "Luis?" she whispered, even though she knew he wasn't there. From the darkness, a faint voice echoed back. "You came back." The haunting reveal. Rachel ran for the van, fumbling for the keys. Her flashlight flickered, showing glimpses of water dripping from the ceiling beams. Even though the rain had stopped hours ago, the air smelled like stagnant creek water. As she opened the driver's door, she froze. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat, a young woman. Soaked, face-pale, dark hair clinging to her cheeks. She turned her head slowly. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. Rachel's heart pounded. Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly. "You know." Then in one blink her body collapsed into water, splashing across the floorboards. Rachel stumbled back, choking. The puddle spread, forming words against the van's rubber mat. "Bridge below!" Summoning her courage, she grabbed her flashlight and crawled under the bridge. The air was freezing, filled with the roar of the creek. There, half buried in the mud, was a rusted metal toolbox. She pried it open. Inside were old police tags, a bracelet, and a torn piece of fabric with faded embroidery. "AH." Suddenly the ground trembled. A voice echoed through the steel. "Now you see where I am. The hidden chamber." Following the whisper, Rachel found a small concrete opening under the bridge, half submerged by water. Inside, her flashlight beam caught the glint of bones. The air was thick with decay. She knelt down, realizing this wasn't just a hiding spot. It was a burial site. An old leather wallet floated near the wall. Inside, a photo of Abigail Holt and a man's hand around her shoulder, the same sheriff who'd shown Rachel the case file. Her breath caught. "Oh my God." Footsteps echoed above, slow, deliberate. She killed her light, heart racing. Someone was on the bridge. Through the cracks she saw boots, then the beam of a flashlight sweeping the water. "Rachel," the sheriff's voice called. "You shouldn't have come back." She froze. Realization dawning like cold fire. The missing girl hadn't fallen. She'd been dumped here. The confrontation. Rachel backed deeper into the tunnel as the sheriff climbed down the embankment, gun in hand. "You had to dig it up, didn't you?" he muttered. Rachel held up her flashlight, trembling. "You killed her." He smiled grimly. "I buried a mistake." Before he could move, the creek water surged upward violently. The temperature dropped. Their breaths turned white. The water churned, glowing faintly blue. Then, from beneath, a hand shot out, grabbing the sheriff's ankle, dragging him down, screaming. Rachel scrambled up the bank as the water swallowed him whole. A voice whispered close to her ear, "Thank you." The storm roared back to life, lightning flashing across the bridge. For an instant, Rachel saw Abigail's face in the water, peaceful now, before fading completely. Morning broke over Hollow Creek. Police found Rachel sitting on the bridge, soaked and shivering, clutching the rusted toolbox. Divers later recovered a skeleton from the tunnel, identified as Abigail Holt. The sheriff's body was never found. In the official report, Rachel's testimony was described as incoherent. She resigned a month later and left North Carolina. But truckers still passing through Hollow Creek say on foggy nights, a woman in a paramedic jacket stands by the old bridge, shining a flashlight toward the creek, as if searching for someone below. And sometimes, if you roll down your window, you can hear two voices under the bridge, one calling for help, the other whispering, "You're not alone anymore." The man in the motel mirror. The desert stop. The desert stretched endlessly under a bruised purple sky as Evan's SUV hummed down the empty stretch of Interstate 40. He'd been driving since dawn, chasing sales meetings from California to New Mexico. When the storm rolled in, it came fast, rain slashing sideways, lightning flickering across the red mesas. He saw the sign through the rain-blurred windshield, Sunset Vista Motel, vacancy. Relieved, he pulled into the gravel lot. The neon sign buzzed weakly. Some letters burned out so it read only Estu Set Visti. Inside, the lobby smelled of mildew and cheap coffee. A bored-looking clerk with deep eye bags slid a key across the counter. Room 12, end of the hall. Cash only. Evan didn't argue. He just wanted to crash. The room was small, wood-paneled walls, Faded carpet, a single bed with yellowed sheets, and a large mirror bolted above the dresser facing the bed. He tossed his suitcase on the chair and lay down, listening to the storm pounding the window. The neon light outside pulsed red through the curtains, flickering across the mirror. For a second it looked like someone was standing behind him. He sat up fast. Nothing, just the reflection of his own tired face and the storm outside. Still, something about the mirror felt wrong. It wasn't perfectly aligned with the wall. A small crack ran along its edge, almost like it had been removed and reattached recently. Evan chuckled nervously. "Creepy decor," he muttered. As he turned off the lamp, thunder boomed, and in the flash he saw his reflection still staring straight ahead, even though he had already looked away. The eyes that didn't blink. At 2:46 a.m., Evan woke to the hum of the motel's air conditioner. He couldn't remember falling asleep. The storm had quieted, replaced by the faint rattle of the neon sign outside. He turned his head. The mirror across the room glimmered in the dark. That's when he saw it. His reflection's eyes were open. Evan froze. He hadn't moved, but in the dim light, his reflection's chest rose and fell differently, slower, heavier. He sat up, staring. The reflection blinked. Half a second off from his own blink. Cold sweat slid down his neck. He whispered, "What the hell?" and threw a pillow at the mirror. The glass rattled. His reflection vanished for a moment, then it returned, smiling, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far. Evan stumbled backward, tripping over his suitcase. He fumbled for the lamp switch, flooding the room with light. The reflection was normal again. He rushed to the mirror, pressing his palm against it. It was cold, much colder than the air around it. Something was moving behind the glass, faint like shifting shadows underwater. He grabbed his phone and snapped a photo. The screen showed not his reflection, but a dark figure standing directly behind him, its hand on his shoulder. He spun around, nothing there. Lightning flashed outside, lighting up the entire room for a heartbeat. In that instant, the figure in the mirror turned its head away like it had been caught watching. The light flickered out again, and the reflection was gone. Evan stood frozen, breathing hard. The air felt heavier now, the silence almost humming. Something was alive inside that glass. The hidden room. Evan couldn't sleep after that. The storm had moved on, but a low hum came from the mirror, a vibration he could almost feel in his bones. He pulled the dresser away from the wall and leaned close. That's when he noticed something. The mirror wasn't sealed. There was a thin gap between the frame and the drywall. He grabbed his pocket knife and pried gently. The edge of the mirror shifted with a faint metallic screech. Behind it was a hollow space. He shone his phone's flashlight inside. The wall had been cut open, leading to a narrow crawl space. Dust floated in the beam of light, and something glimmered inside. Evan reached in and pulled out a small camera lens, duct taped to a bundle of old wires. His stomach twisted. Someone had been recording the room from behind the mirror. He reached deeper. His fingers brushed something soft. He pulled out a black leather glove. Then something moved behind the wall, a scraping noise. Then breathing. Evan froze, phone light shaking. A voice whispered through the gap, "I can see you now." He stumbled backward, kicking the dresser. The mirror rattled violently as a hand, pale and bony, pressed flat against the inside of the glass from the other side. The reflection warped, bulging outward. The hand slid downward, leaving streaks that looked like blood. The humming turned into a low, throaty laugh, echoing from inside the walls. Evan bolted for the door, but it wouldn't open. The deadbolt had been removed. The manager's secret. At dawn, Evan forced the door open using a coat hanger and stumbled into the empty parking lot. His phone battery was dead. The motel office light flickered on. The manager, the same man from last night, stood behind the glass window, smiling faintly. "You're up early," he said. "Sleep well?" Evan's voice cracked. "There's something in that room." Behind the mirror, the manager's smile didn't fade. "Room 12 always gives people trouble." "I'm serious," Evan barked. "There's a camera. Someone was watching me." The man sighed and handed him a yellowed business card. "Property of Desert Pines Realty. Sold 2012. We don't use that room anymore," he said. "Not since the accident." "What accident?" Evan asked. The manager turned away, ignoring the question. "You should get on your way, sir." "Long road ahead," Evan left, furious and shaken. As he pulled out, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The manager was still standing outside the office, but now he wasn't alone. A tall figure in black stood beside him, motionless. When lightning flickered, the second figure disappeared, and the neon sign sparked out completely. Evan looked back at the highway, endless and empty. But as he drove, every reflective surface in the car window, his side mirror, flickered for a split second with a smiling reflection that wasn't his. The file. By midday, Evan stopped at a diner 20 miles away. He couldn't shake what had happened. He asked the waitress, an older woman named Cheryl, about the Sunset Vista Motel. Her face went pale. "That place burned down years ago," she said. "You sure you were there?" Evan frowned. "Last night. Room 12, she shook her head slowly. "There's no room 12 anymore. Fire took it first. A man, maintenance worker, was found behind the wall. They said he'd been living there, watching people through mirrors." Evan's fork froze midway. What happened to him? They never found him after the fire. Guess he liked to watch storms roll in. Her words echoed in his mind as thunder rumbled outside again, though the sky was perfectly clear. Evan pulled out his phone to show her the photo he took, the one with the figure behind him, but the image was gone. Only static filled the screen. He muttered to himself, "No, no, no," and turned the phone off. In the reflection of the diner window behind his shoulder, a faint silhouette stood, tall, motionless, smiling. The return. Haunted by insomnia and guilt, Evan returned to where the motel had stood. The lot was nothing but blackened concrete and twisted rebar now. The neon sign lay in pieces, half buried in dust, but the room numbers painted on the curb were still visible. He followed them, 8, 9, 10, 11, then stopped. There was no 12, only a square patch of scorched earth darker than the rest. He crouched down, brushing the dirt away. Beneath it, something solid, a mirror shard. When he tilted it toward the light, it didn't reflect the desert sky. It reflected the motel room, exactly as it had been. Bed, dresser, flickering neon outside. Then, his own reflection appeared, except it wasn't him. It was grinning again. The reflection lifted its hand and tapped twice on the glass. The shard cracked down the middle, splitting into jagged pieces. Evan dropped it, shaking. His car alarm went off in the distance, blaring like a scream across the empty highway. The night drive, Evan sped down the highway, headlights cutting through the desert dark. Rain began again, sudden, relentless. The same storm from before. His windshield wipers squeaked in rhythm, thud, thud, thud. He looked in the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in the back seat. He slammed the brakes, swerving onto the shoulder. The seat was empty, but condensation on the rear window spelled 3 words in dripping letters. "Still watching you." He jumped out of the car, trembling. Lightning flashed across the desert horizon, illuminating the silhouette of the motel, standing there again, whole, glowing faintly in the rain, every room dark except one. Room 12. A figure stood in the window. Hand pressed to the glass, Evan ran toward it, but when the lightning struck again, the motel was gone. Only wet sand and thunder remained. The motel lives 2 months later. A state trooper driving along I-40 spotted an abandoned car half buried in sand near mile marker 217. The keys were still in the ignition. The driver's seat was empty. On the passenger seat was a cracked mirror. In its reflection, a faint image of a man sleeping in a motel bed. Locals say that on stormy desert nights, when the rain hits the asphalt just right, you can still see the Sunset Vista Motel's neon sign flicker on for a few seconds, casting red light across the sand. And if you stop and look into your car mirror right then, you might see someone else smiling back at you. The house that whistled. The move-in. The Henson house sat on a sloping street under tall oak trees, their orange leaves fluttering in the chill of autumn. Claire Henson had bought it cheap, too cheap, from an online auction. It was a 2-story Victorian, painted pale yellow with white shutters and a porch swing that creaked even when the wind was still. When she moved in, everything felt oddly preserved. Lace curtains, dust-covered furniture, and a grand piano. In the corner of the living room, its keys yellowed from age. The realtor had told her, previous owner passed away, lived here alone for 40 years. That first night, Claire sat sketching near the window while rain pattered on the glass. The only sound was the soft tick of an antique clock and the occasional creak from upstairs. Then from somewhere deep inside the house came a faint sound, a long, slow whistle, not like the wind through a crack, but like someone deliberately whistling a tune. She froze, pencil in hand. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. Claire stood listening. Only the rain now. Old pipes, she whispered to herself, forcing a smile. But as she went upstairs to unpack, she noticed something unsettling. The dust on the hallway floor. There were footprints, bare footprints, leading straight into the attic door, which was slightly ajar, swaying gently as if it had just been touched. The whistling returns. The next day, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching motes of dust in the air. Claire made coffee and told herself it had all been nerves. By afternoon, she'd forgotten the sound entirely, until night came. Around 10:45, the whistling returned. This time it came from the upstairs hallway, slow and deliberate, the same tune repeating again and again. Claire grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept up the stairs. The sound stopped. The hallway was empty except for framed photographs on the wall, all black and white portraits of people she didn't recognize. She aimed the flashlight at the attic door. It was closed now. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched the knob. Ice cold. Suddenly the whistling started again, but now it was right behind her. She spun around, no one there, only shadows cast by the hall lamp. The whistling cut off mid-note, followed by a soft tapping from inside one of the bedroom walls. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. She pressed her ear against the wall and whispered, "Hello?" A single word came back, muffled and low. "Downstairs." Claire stumbled back, heart racing. She grabbed her phone, 11:13 p.m. She turned and bolted downstairs, flicking on every light in the house. But when she reached the living room, she saw the grand piano lid had lifted open by itself, one key pressed down, then another, forming the same haunting tune she'd heard, whistled before. The photograph. The next morning, Claire called her friend Laura, a photographer. She asked her to come by. Laura arrived around noon, her camera slung over her shoulder. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she joked. Claire showed her the piano and explained what she'd heard. Laura took a few photos of the room, teasing, "Maybe I'll catch your ghost." Later that night, Laura texted her one of the pictures. "Hey, who's the old guy in the corner?" Claire frowned. "What old guy?" She opened the photo and froze. In the reflection of the piano's glossy surface, behind her own silhouette, stood the faint image of a man wearing a dark suit and a wide-brimmed hat. His face turned slightly toward her. She zoomed in. The man was standing directly next to the piano stool, his mouth slightly open, as if whistling. Claire's blood ran cold. She dropped the phone on the table. Then, from upstairs, 3 knocks, the same rhythm. She called out, "Who's there?" Silence. The air turned cold. The chandelier swayed slightly, its crystals clinking like distant bells. Then the piano played one single, sharp note, loud enough to rattle the picture frames. When she looked again at the photo on her phone, the reflection had changed. The man was closer now, his face visible. He was smiling. The neighbor's story. The following day, Claire crossed the street to speak with her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who had lived there since the 1970s. When she mentioned the address, Mrs. Callahan's face went pale. "That house," she whispered, "used to belong to the Donnellys. He was a music teacher, played piano all hours of the night." Claire nodded slowly. "Was he the one who died there?" The old woman hesitated. "Yes, but not naturally. Police said he fell down the stairs, but folks around here knew he didn't just fall." "What do you mean?" "They found marks on his neck, like someone had grabbed him. After that, people said they still heard him whistling in the dark." Claire's chest tightened. "Did anyone live there after that?" Mrs. Callahan nodded faintly. "A young couple tried. They moved out after 2 weeks, said someone was watching them from the attic." As Claire turned to leave, the wind picked up. The old oak branches creaked like whispers. Mrs. Callahan called after her. "If he starts whistling again, don't answer it." Claire stopped. "Answer what?" The woman's expression darkened. "He whistles to draw you closer. The moment you hum back, he won't stop until you're part of the song." Says the hidden room. That evening, Claire brought a ladder and pushed open the attic door. Dust cascaded from above as she climbed. The space was dim, lit only by the flashlight beam. Cobwebs hung from the rafters. In the corner, she found an old rocking chair, a broken metronome and a dusty music stand. Scattered across the floor were yellowed sheet music pages, all handwritten. The same melody she'd been hearing. She picked one up. At the bottom, scrawled in shaky handwriting, "For Claire." Her heart pounded. "No way," she whispered. The whistling started again, this time echoing right above her head, though there was no more ceiling. She aimed the light upward and saw the faint outline of a man sitting cross-legged on the ceiling beams, head tilted, whistling softly. He was wearing a suit, a wide-brimmed hat. As soon as the beam touched him, the whistling stopped, and his head snapped downward, face pale and eyeless. Claire screamed, stumbling down the ladder. Behind her, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The possession. For 2 days, Claire refused to sleep. She kept every light on, but exhaustion took over eventually. When she woke that night, the house was silent, too silent. The clock had stopped ticking. She got up to get water, passing by the piano. Its lid was open again. She whispered, "Leave me alone." Then a soft whistle answered. The sound came not from upstairs this time, but from inside her own throat. She gasped, covering her mouth. But the whistling continued, rising in pitch, escaping from her as if she were an instrument. Her hands trembled. Her reflection in the window smiled faintly, lips moving on their own, mimicking the tune. Panicked, she ran to the front door, but it wouldn't open. The knob was red-hot, glowing faintly. The piano keys began pressing themselves again, faster, harder. The house seemed to breathe, and over it all to me, her own voice whistled the melody louder and louder, until it drowned out everything else. The final note. The next morning, a delivery man knocked on the door. No answer. Through the window, he saw Claire sitting motionless at the piano, head tilted downward. Police arrived later that afternoon. They found her there, eyes open but lifeless, her fingers frozen mid-note. No signs of struggle. On the piano, a sheet of music sat, newly written, ink still wet. Title, Claire's Song. And at the bottom, signed, J. Donnelly. The coroner reported no cause of death, no bruises, no poison, no trauma. But her lungs were filled with air, as if she'd been whistling when she died. The haunting melody. Weeks later, the house went up for sale again. The realtor replaced the locks and aired it out. Everything seemed quiet, until she turned to leave and heard it, faint but clear, a whistle drifting through the empty halls. The piano played a few soft notes by itself, and a breeze pushed open the window. On the street outside, leaves swirled, forming the outline of a music note before scattering. At night, neighbors say they still hear it, that eerie tune echoing faintly through the autumn air. And if you stop to listen closely, sometimes, you can hear two voices whistling together. The Hitchhiker at mile marker 81, the road that never ends. The desert stretched endlessly under the Nevada night sky. Mark Delaney's semi-truck thundered down US Route 50, headlights slicing through the darkness. The dashboard clock read 2:47 and the radio played a faint country tune, crackling with static. He'd been driving 14 hours straight, hauling medical supplies from Reno to Salt Lake City. The road was empty, except for the miles of open highway and the occasional road sign half buried in sand. Then came the rain. Out of nowhere, it fell in thick sheets, smearing the windshield and turning the blacktop to glass. Mark slowed to 50, gripping the wheel tightly. That's when he saw her. A figure on the roadside near mile marker 81, wearing a soaked white dress. She stood perfectly still, hair plastered across her face, thumb out like she was hitchhiking. Mark's stomach twisted. What the hell is someone doing out here? He flicked on his high beams, and she vanished. He slammed the brakes, the trailer fishtailing. When the truck finally stopped, his heart was pounding. He looked in the mirrors, nothing but rain and desert. He let out a shaky breath and started rolling again, but just as his pulse began to calm, he glanced at the passenger seat mirror and saw a wet handprint on the glass. It wasn't his. The passenger. Mark told himself it had to be condensation. He rubbed the handprint off and kept driving, but a few miles later, the CB radio crackled to life, just static at first. Then a voice, faint and female. "You shouldn't have left me." Mark froze, eyes darting to the radio. "Who is this?" No response, only static. The temperature inside the cab dropped suddenly. His breath fogged the glass. He reached for the heater dial, but it didn't respond. That's when the passenger seat creaked. Mark turned his head slowly. The seatbelt buckle was moving, clicking open and shut by itself. Then he saw it. A few strands of wet black hair caught in the buckle. He grabbed the dash camera and replayed the last few minutes, frame by frame. And there she was. In one still frame at timestamp 3:06 a.m., the camera showed a woman sitting beside him, face pale, eyes hollow, dripping water onto the floor mat. Mark slammed the camera down and swerved off the road, tires skidding through the rain. He jumped out of the truck, heart pounding, standing on the soaked pavement under a flickering highway light. But when he turned back toward the cab, the passenger door was wide open, and the radio was playing the same song again. But now it was skipping on the same verse over and over. "Left me. Left me, left me." The man at the gas station. An hour later, Mark pulled into a tiny 24-hour gas station in the middle of nowhere, a flickering neon sign that read, "Ed's Fuel and Mart." The rain had eased to a drizzle. He stepped inside, dripping wet, greeted by a bearded clerk in a trucker cap reading Army Vet. Mark asked, "Anyone ever seen a woman on the side of the highway around mile 81? The clerk froze mid-sip of coffee. "White dress?" "Yeah." "Buddy, that's not someone you pick up. That's her." The man leaned closer. "Used to be a girl named Annie Bell. Car broke down back in '92. Some drunk driver hit her while she was walking for help. They say she still tries to hitch rides, never makes it home." Mark rubbed his temples. "You're telling me she's dead?" "Long time. But folks swear she climbs right into trucks when the rain hits. Last guy that saw her drove straight off the road. The store lights flickered once, then twice." The clerk looked uneasy. "You drove past mile marker 81 tonight?" Mark nodded slowly. The man's face paled. "Then you'd better not stop again. If she rides with you twice, you don't finish the trip." Before Mark could respond, thunder shook the windows, and from outside came a faint whistle carried by the wind. The clerk's coffee cup rattled on the counter. "She's here," he whispered. The call Mark jumped back into his truck and peeled out of the gas station lot. The rain poured harder now, lightning flashing across the open desert. He checked his phone. No signal. The CB radio had gone completely dead. Then, out of nowhere, his cell phone rang. The caller ID just said unknown. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Static. Then faintly, the sound of breathing. He said louder, "Who is this?" A woman's whisper came through. "Why did you leave me on the road?" Mark's grip on the phone tightened. "Annie?" The line crackled. "You promised you'd take me home." He threw the phone onto the seat, yelling, "Leave me the hell alone!" The horn blared suddenly by itself, one long, blaring note. The windshield fogged instantly, writing appearing on the inside glass, traced by an unseen finger. Mile 81. Then the truck's engine began to sputter, slowing, coughing. The headlights dimmed. He coasted to a stop. When he looked up, his stomach dropped. He was parked right in front of mile marker 81 again. The ride home. Rain hammered against the windshield. Lightning illuminated the desert in flashes. Mark sat frozen, gripping the wheel. Then the passenger door clicked open slowly, on its own. He turned his head, and she was there. Annie Bell. Soaked white dress, bare feet, dark hair stuck to her face. She looked at him with hollow eyes and said softly, "You came back for me." Mark's pulse thundered. "You're not real." She smiled faintly. I just need to go home. Then she pointed ahead, toward the endless stretch of black highway. Something inside him moved, whether fear or guilt he couldn't tell. He shifted into drive. For miles neither of them spoke. The rain eased, and a pale dawn began to creep over the horizon. Finally, she whispered, "This is where I died." Mark slowed. Ahead at the bend was a rusted-out car half buried in the sand, its license plate faded but visible, AB 1992. He turned to her. "Annie." The seat beside him was empty. Only a puddle of water remained on the fabric, shaped like a seated body. The sheriff. By noon, Mark reached the next town, Ely, Nevada. He parked at the diner and went straight to the sheriff's office next door. Sheriff Dawson, a heavy-set man in his 60s, listened quietly as Mark told his story. When he mentioned Annie Bell, the sheriff sighed. "You're not the first." He pulled out a worn manila folder labeled Bell Annie, 1992. Inside were crime scene photos, a wrecked sedan, tire marks, and a young woman's body covered with a white sheet. "Storm night," the sheriff said. "Driver never stopped. Locals see her sometimes when it rains, always around mile marker 81. Mark leaned forward. "Why me?" The sheriff shrugged. "Maybe she thinks you're the one who left her." As Mark stood to leave, the sheriff said, "One more thing." He opened a drawer and handed him a photo, an evidence picture. It was of Annie's body being loaded into an ambulance. Behind the stretcher, standing near the wreck, was a man in a trucker uniform, logo reading Delaney Freight Co. The same company Mark worked for. The storm returns. That night, Mark checked into a roadside motel. He couldn't shake the image of that photo. Maybe his father, who disappeared in the 1990s, had been the driver who hit her. Rain began to fall again. The motel lights flickered. He sat on the bed staring at the mirror and saw water running down the glass from nowhere. Then the radio in the corner clicked on by itself, playing that same old country tune. A whisper filled the room. "You brought me home." Mark turned slowly toward the window. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for his truck, and standing beside it in the rain was the figure in white. Lightning flashed, and she smiled. The endless mile. The next morning, the motel staff found Mark's room empty. The bed untouched, his truck still in the lot. Inside the cab, the dashboard camera was still recording. The footage showed him driving through a storm, talking softly to someone unseen. Then, at mile marker 81, the camera caught a pale hand resting gently on his shoulder. The truck slowed, drifted off the road and came to a stop. The recording ended there. Today, truckers passing through Route 50 say they still see a man driving slow through the rain, a semi with one headlight out, keeping pace beside them. If you look close enough, you can see two shapes in the cab, a man at the wheel and a woman beside him, both drenched, both staring straight ahead. And every time it rains in Nevada, near mile marker 81, you can hear a faint country tune echoing from nowhere.